Well, let's get started then. It's 2 o'clock, 2:01. Welcome everyone attending and our panelists here. My name is Mark Ayers. I am an associate and senior project manager at Ferraro Choi and Associates on Oahu, and secretary for the Hawaii chapter of the Association for Learning Environments, also known as A4LE. And we like to usually have in-person events, but obviously in these times we organize a webinar on a subject which we know is among the most foremost topics on many people's minds right now as we kind of work our way through summer and towards the start of normal school year. If anyone here is a member of the A4LE chapter, it's very expensive to join, and the DOE, in fact, has a reduced rate if you're with the Department of Education. So I encourage you to reach out. Our chapter kind of restarted in 2019. We had 2 events last year to kind of get things rolling. We'd hope to have more, of course, this year, but we've got this today, and hopefully we can put something together before the end of the year in an in-person, maybe outdoor environment where we all feel comfortable. So with the Hawaii Public Schools scheduled to open August 4th, of course, some mainland schools are opening much later than that, and private schools locally opening in a few weeks. Many search. Probably the most is how can schools open, operate, and maintain their facilities for the health and well-being of the students and faculty. As a parent myself, I got a taste of at-home learning back in April and May, and I can say without a doubt it was challenging for our entire family. We were grateful to still have jobs and have work to do, but it was quite a juggling act for us for those final weeks of the 2020 class year. We know that more challenges lay ahead and hope that there's some level of normalcy that we can achieve safely for the benefit of our families. So to the end, today we assembled a panelists to offer local and mainland perspectives. And, just a quick order introductions. The attendees that are on are all muted, and when we get to a portion that's a little more on the Q&A, after we hear some words from the panelists, we ask that you to write those questions in the chat box, and myself or Donna will address those to the panelists and kind of call attention to that. So let me, introductions first. We have Randy Tanaka. He's the Assistant Superintendent, Office of Facilities and Operation. Randy, can you give a wave? Everyone can't see your, there we go. Thanks, Randy. He was appointed Assistant Superintendent in early 2020 to oversee construction, maintenance of facilities, and the operations and food services, transportation, and security for the public school system. Then we have Steve Murakami, if you can wave, Steve. He is the former Director of Capital Planning and Construction and later Chief Operating Officer at Tacoma Public Schools in the Greater Seattle-Tacoma area. And he's now a principal at OAC Services in Seattle, and currently on the K-12 team to support the Lake Washington School District's bond program. We are waiting in a moment for Sean Tajima to join us, but next we have John Henry. Give us a wave, John. Thank you. John Henry was selected to serve as principal for James Campbell High School in January of 2015. And before that, he was principal at Elima Intermediate for many years, and before that, vice principal at Kapolei High. He started his career in education as special ed at Makakilo and taught fourth grade. Principal Lee was the Campbell Kapolei nominee for the 2019 Masayuki Tokioka Principal of the Year Award. Congratulations, John. And then we are grateful to have a student, Kyla Picardo. Hi, Kyla. And she's an 11th grade student from James Campbell High School, and she may or may not be interested in politics. That's okay if you're not, believe me. At some point, we hope to be joined by Sean Tajima. He is the Campbell Kapolei Complex Superintendent, effective in 2018, and he's been principal of Miu Valley Middle since 2014. Prior to that, he served as principal at Paoa Elementary, Makakilo Elementary, and vice principal at Kapolei Middle. And he began his career with the Department of Education as special ed teacher at Nanakului.
I'm Mark, I'm on.
Oh, great. Thanks, Sean. Sorry, I'm kind of reading from something. Maybe I can't see her, but that's well enough. Thank you very much to all of you for joining. And I would like to turn it over to Randy, if you can kind of start us off with some thoughts.
I think, you know, we all realize that we're in a kind of different world, and we don't know how along this twilight zone is going to kind of happen. And, you know, it's, you know, and there are different views of the world. I mean, there's the student view, there's the parent view, the school operations view, the teacher's view, and the state view. So when you kind of bundle that all together, at the end of the day, we cannot forget that our mission is education. And that has kind of turned upside down. How we communicate and how we educate is very impactful going forward, because education is investment spending going forward. Right? We invest in our assets, the youth, to hopefully become productive citizens and give them the critical thinking that we need to address some of the future issues. And then on the other side, we have management. My job is to manage facilities and to have it student ready, teacher ready. So that comes heavy into play. Our average age of our schools is 63 years old. We've got 260, almost 300 with charter schools. We've got about a $2.4 billion budget. So we're an economic monster in and of itself. And then we're more than schools now. We're community centers, we're care centers for the youth, after school programs, all of the above. And then health and safety. The parents and the families let their children to us for a period of time during the day with a number of different ambitions, that we're giving them good education. We're trying to build value sets into the students. And yet we're obligated to take care of their kids, which is critical. I have two daughters. When they were going to school, I mean, safety, health and safety was a big part of it. And so that's what my job is. For disclosure purposes, Superintendent Tajima was on the selection committee when I got picked. So I hold him partly responsible for where I am today, good, bad, or otherwise, but it's all good. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Randy. Steve, could we turn to you?
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, I'm in the Seattle Puget Sound area, and my primary focus is working for the second largest school district in the state. We have just under 60 schools and 30,000 kids. But I also work with several other school districts in the Puget Sound area in long-range planning, visioning development, mostly on the physical facility side. But as former COO of Tacoma Schools, I had maintenance operations, transportation, nutrition services, Um, and there's so many different aspects that we're facing when we're considering reopening. In Washington State, we are looking at a 6-foot separation, and we're trying to figure out, what the impacts of that are. And we've mapped, the districts I work with right now. We're mapping every single moment of a student's day from the time they get to the bus stop or dropped off at school and through the day and then back home, and trying to figure out some of the mandates that are in our state for how we're going to do triage and check-ins and queuing of students. At the top of our concern really is we've worked really hard over the last few decades to create innovative learning environments for students. We've worked to really buffer our safety and security measures. And when you apply the COVID measures to that, a lot of those things go out the door. And so I'm assuming you guys have at the top of your list too, equity and access. And that's one of my biggest concerns with all of this, is that some families will re-enter schools easier than others. And without a really thoughtful plan and being intentional in our actions, we're going to have inequity in how students access their education. And for the clients I'm working with, I'm really stressing, how does their strategic mission, vision, and values shape how they're going to reopen? Right now, it seems like chaos and everybody's frantically trying to figure out how they're going to do it. But if you get away from your mission, vision, and values, and if you don't bring along your community, your parents, your students, your staff, with all of the different bargaining units that we have to represent, there's going to be issues. And so we're trying to be really thoughtful in our approach. And working with districts across Washington State, I'm getting calls all the time about facility directors asking questions about ramping up mechanical air units and not really understanding some of the ramifications. And I've gone into schools where we're laying out test fits and ADA access is out the door, and there's life safety issues being thrown at us that we're trying to make sure that when we do reopen, we reopen with intentionality. And we have a little bit more time. Our schools typically open first week of September after Labor Day weekend. And so we're in the mix right now of, I'm working with 3 different school districts where we're mapping every classroom. We're doing test fits, we're counting furniture, we're doing test layouts, and really trying to figure out capacities and how we're going to navigate kids through our facilities, and figuring out what kind of models we're going to offer. Most school districts in the area are going to have a virtual learning aspect as we re-enter. The priority for us has been trying to figure out how we get our kindergartners and first graders back into school in person, so that we can, it's harder for them to bridge the technology and the virtual learning landscape. So those are some of the primary concerns we're looking at and what I'm dealing with for the next 6 or 7 weeks.
Thanks, Steve. So Washington State was kind of at the beginning of what we call the early days of the pandemic. Was your office, or was the school system up there thinking far ahead that there may be an issue, coming down the line? Do you feel like you guys have maybe a few months jump on a lot of people, or you just didn't know how big it was going to be, and here we are?
Yeah, it felt like it snowballed on us. I am in King County, and King County was the first to really put us on the map, the COVID map. And so, in late February, everything stopped. My company of 150 project managers, construction managers, all went to work from home. It was amazing to see how quickly Zoom took over our day-to-day life. And schools were a really interesting thing to watch and migrate. We had some school districts, large school districts in the area, that instantly went to virtual learning. And what we saw was in the Puget Sound area, so you've got the Seattle, Tacoma area. If you're within, 20 miles of the sound and you have views of the water, you're in some highly affluent neighborhoods. But as soon as you get on the east side of our I-5 highway, the economics and diversity, socioeconomics, and just really changed radically. And so we saw school districts that didn't have the resources to adapt just stalling and trying to figure out how they were going to reach their kids when most families didn't have access to Wi-Fi. A lot of them had single parents that were still trying to figure out how to work, and so daycare issues. The first priority that I saw most school districts jumping onto was nutrition and trying to figure out how to still provide lunches during the school year to their students. And a lot of the school districts are actually still running their nutrition programs right now into summer because there's been some really hard hit communities. But yeah, it was really interesting to see how districts responded, because the affluent school districts that had one-to-one laptops already issued were really easy to migrate into a digital world. But the poorer districts in our state really suffered, really did suffer.
All right, thanks, Steve. I'm sure we'll probably be touching more on that in terms of the how that equity balance works itself out in these schools. Sean, can I turn to you for a few opening thoughts?
Sure. As everybody said, it's been a interesting time to say the least. And I can't say enough about our school principals. I can speak for the 18 principals in our complex area, Campbell Kapolei. One of them being Principal Lee from Campbell High School. But even as I talk to my colleagues, the other complex area superintendents, the principals across the state are just tirelessly working to provide the best possible quality education with a moving target of guidelines right now. So just their adaptability, their care, their commitment for their students and their staff and the community. I just can't speak enough about that. But our priorities as a Hawaii State DOE right now is, of course, safety first. Next would be to bring our most vulnerable learners back to campus, the special needs students, the English language learner students, and our lower elementary students. And those are students that are not as receptive to distance learning. Ultimately, we want to bring as many kids as we can back to campus, just because it's hard to replace face-to-face learning. And lastly, just distance learning is going to be a reality in education, at least for the time being. So it's making sure that all kids have connectivity and accessibility to distance learning. I look at students like Kyla, and this puts a human face to our clients. And while we think about all students, we see someone like Kyla and we picture her coming onto campus. What kind of education can we provide her on campus? And then we think of her doing distance learning, and how can we have her get the most out of her education with a distance learning package as well. I have two daughters. One just graduated this past year. So her senior year was capped with 1/4 of distance learning. Then I have a younger one who's going to be a senior this year, whose senior year is going to start in this weird scenario. So it is personal for me. I live with it at home, so I know exactly what the students are going through when we talk about that social emotional support through this time. Every family is different, so the situation of my family and my kids are different from Kyla's and different from kids at other schools with different situations as well. So it's just trying to be cognizant and empathetic toward everybody's situation, parents' work situation, to provide the best possible model, which, as we're starting to realize, there may not be one model even within a school that'll fit it all. And now we're kind of tasked with breaking up with different models within the models, which is making it exponentially more challenging. But for our principals, it's worth the challenge because they're committed to providing the best they can to all their families. But it's an interesting time, and I just feel I'm proud to work with the principals that I do, because they're just so committed, innovative in providing the best for their communities.
All right, thanks so much, Sean. And as you say, we've got one of your principals right here, John Henry. So you're kind of maybe a little more boots on the ground. And you can tell us what things look like from your perspective at your school.
And thank you for the opportunity. And I think exactly what the other panelists shared is the flexibility that's going to be required for this year is key. We put a document just this past Friday to our parents and families describing what our basic plans were in an abbreviated document, and then already on Monday we had to send out another revision. So almost in back-to-back days, things are changing rapidly. And we feel confident, in that we're going to make the best, decision given the current data. I did kind of gather a couple of, pictures just to kind of reinforce, because, the picture is going to tell a better story than I could. Our campus is a little bit older. We've been, around, in Eva and Eva Beach for quite a while, serving generations of families. So what you're going to see is nothing that's going to be groundbreaking. If you've gone to the store, the bank, or anything like that, then you're going to be familiar with some of the social distancing and the other safeguards that are in place. But I know some of you are not familiar with our campus, so I wanted to show it just briefly. Like I mentioned, it's been around for a while, established in 1962. And so that means we've got a couple of older buildings. Not sure if D building was there from the very beginning. And then there have been some improvements to the architecture to improve on heat abatement kind of issues. So we've got some older buildings and we've got some newer buildings on our campus also that kind of meld together, rapidly growing area, and one of the larger high schools, compared to the Hawaii school systems at 3,100 students. So like I said, this is a newer building, dedicated in 2014, I think. And this is our brand new building that we're fortunate to have, and we're waiting for it to be released to us, and it should be happening really, really soon. So we're excited for that. So again, a mixture of different buildings that have been around for quite a while, and then one that is just about finishing completion now. All of our buildings will house different academies, and that's how we're kind of breaking up our school within a school based upon career pathways and academies. So that's the big kind of buildings that are there. Again, these are some of the things that you'll see when you come back to school now. We did shut down, like most of the other schools, for the physical instruction, but now as we welcome students back, and public and families, you'll see a lot of this kind of signage around, and you'll see things like the blue tape and the social distancing things that will be placed on the floor. Things like the personalized 6 feet apart and the flow of campus. You'll see a lot of the plexiglass things, in the common areas that service both our student, staff, and parents, just to help protect and minimize, transmission of things. What I mentioned before, the flow of campus, we want to make sure that, we're trying to make sure that, we don't have people coming face to face as much as possible. So nothing, again, groundbreaking, but as we look at the architecture and making sure that, now we have to be careful about things like going to the restroom or even walking up and down the stairs. So, our staff are working hard to make sure that, we can provide safeguards, and that's something as simple yet time consuming as putting, a stripe down the middle of the stairs, creating stencils to spray paint so people know to go up on the right-hand side and down on the right-hand side, and things like that. We're a large campus, so that means we don't fit everybody in the cafeteria. We wouldn't want to do that anyways. So we usually have lunch in multiple areas served out of different buildings. So that means spray painting stencils on the ground on where people should be standing and whatnot. So that's why you'll see in that middle picture those foot marks, and people will be reminded to stay 6 feet apart if they're standing in line anywhere. For the restrooms, making sure that we put capacity signs on them also, so we don't have too many people congregating in the restroom. Of course, teenagers, sometimes that's where they feel they want to go to congregate and be away from the adult eyes. So that'll be us having to make sure that we go in and check and make sure that we don't have too many people in there. These are attempts at making sure that our desks are spaced appropriately apart, and we are aiming for the 6 feet also. The challenge are we have some small rooms. So this is probably the smallest room we have on our campus. It's probably about 650 square feet. So these are our staff going in, trying to make sure that we can, spread them out and figure out a maximum capacity for students in each of our rooms. And this is more of a standard size room, but an example of what we need to do in terms of clearing just everything out. And that's why I do feel that we're fortunate to be a secondary school. We know that some elementary schools, the teachers have accumulated lots and lots of stuff, but we have some teachers like that also. So clearing out rooms as much as possible, just so we can kind of spread out desks. So when our students come back, the rooms will look different, and so will the campus. We're in a hybrid model, meaning that we're going to give options to our families. We know a lot of them are concerned, about the pandemic that's going on, and that's totally understandable. So we're offering a blended learning option with 1 or 2 days on campus, and then the rest of the time online learning during the week. If families prefer just to be totally distance learning, that is an option also. And then we do have a face-to-face option, which Kaz Tajima mentioned before, would focus more on our vulnerable population of students, making sure that they're taken care of, especially if they don't respond well to the distance learning options. These are our platforms on how we reach our students with online learning, and that's basically it. We do have a sanitization plan also throughout the day, halfway through the day, and then after school, cleaning all of our rooms. And that's it in a nutshell.
Thanks very much, John. Really like Slipper goes theater place on campus. It's really cool.
Mark, you're breaking up just a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
And we did have a question also, and I think it was for John Henry Lee.
Let me get to Kyla.
Oh, okay.
As Randy said earlier, Kyla's the client. all of this is for your benefit and for the benefit of your friends. So would love to hear your perspective of both how you kind of handled that transition that you talked to us a little earlier about coming out of the end of the last school year, and what your thoughts are moving into your next year.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyla. I'm going to 11th grade at James Campbell High School, and as a student going to James Campbell High School, I do have concerns, and I do feel empathy for like our admin and for the whole situation about the pandemic. But I did talk to my friends, and I do talk to people outside of my school, like in different parts of the island and whatnot. But back, was it May? Yeah, May, March, during that time when we first transitioned onto online, we were a bit, we weren't used to it and whatnot, but we did have that sense of going online, going on Google Classroom, doing stuff online back in elementary school through middle school. So it wasn't something very new to us. It was just the fact that we were at home, no socialization. But Campbell, they were very prepared upon going online and communicating with their students, and I felt very appreciative about that. But we did recently get the schedule upon going to school only for 1 day, and I know students were very, very not upset, but they were really like bummed about not seeing their friends. And personally, I'm very paranoid and whatnot, so I don't mind going to school for only 1 day, but the socialization that they need is what they're concerned about. And I know going to school is for education wise, and having Google Classroom and everyone on the same page is what is great about that part. But as sorry, I'm very still getting but as a student, again, different perspective wise, uh, I'm very proud of how different schools and how the circularization of the pandemic is going through. I know that everyone is working and trying to do good for us students. And I think that's what us students need to understand. Like, not just our perspective, but the admin's perspective, everyone else's perspective. And I feel that we are not, you know, going through that. And I know that the admin is also looking through our perspective, you know, emotionally wise and education wise. And I am very appreciative for how they're communicating with us. And I know parents are very concerned about us going to school. I know my friends' parents are concerned about, you know, the social distancing and how many kids are in each classroom. And again, Campbell is communicating through that and trying to make revisions to everyone's needs. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kyla. So it sounds like you're kind of anxious on the one sense to maybe get back to school, but then you're anxious that you don't want, you know, to be susceptible to any, you know, obviously health effects. We do have the benefit in Hawaii, which is great, of just having, I mean, looking at your campus, John Henry, how much open space, outdoor space that we have. And of course, we know a lot of that is hot, but we also know a lot of learning can still happen outdoors. And, you know, that outdoor classroom maybe can be an opportunity to, you know, take some of that heat out of trying to use a 600 square foot room with 6 foot separation. So, well, thank you all very much. We do have one question. I'll just kind of lead us in with that. It's kind of general in a sense, and maybe this is how this is being handled at the high level and the school level, and that just basically is about how do you keep teachers and admin and maintenance safe and healthy. John, you already showed us, you know, things that I think we're familiar with now over the past several months, which is the plexiglass shields, the desks moved to the side, directional signage of how to stack, and you talked about how you know, regular cleaning. Sean, as complex superintendent, how are those procedures either being mandated above, or are they kind of being worked through? As John says, there has to be some flexibility on how it works for each school.
So it's both. I think Principal Lee shared some oversight on how they're handling it at Campbell High School. I think for the overall safety of everyone to prevent any kind of spread of COVID, one is the obvious one of social distancing. Second is, I think everybody needs to be just cognizant of symptoms, and if they are exhibiting symptoms, to get medical attention to see if they may possibly be positive for COVID or have some kind of other illness that needs treatment. But social distancing would be the primary means of precaution for this. I think it's going to differ between the ages of the students. Very different from lower elementary to high school. I think for the lower elementary kids, especially for K1, 2 kids, they're just going to need not simple, guidelines on how they're going to interact with their classmates, with their teacher, how they're going to behave in the classroom. So there's going to be a lot of structure, a lot more rules for them to follow, what it looks like. Whereas for the older kids, like in secondary schools, who are able to process a lot more, I think it's going to be more them understanding why social distancing is important, understanding it conceptually instead of memorizing rules as you would for lower elementary kids. So I think the approach to social distancing, well, every school is going to have reminders and guides on the floor and different procedures. I think the approach to the younger students compared to the older students will be a lot different, especially for the older students who are going to soon leave school and be out in the world, for them to just understand the concept of social distancing and why it's important.
Thanks. Steve, what have you been seeing up there? Is there how things are being mandated or worked through the school system, and how's that being communicated to the families and students?
A number of different ways. Our state is organized under a state superintendent of public instruction, and there are 295 school districts in our state. And so there's been a lot of communication between superintendents trying to figure out, they all recognize that transportation is one of the big key factors to try and figure out. We rely heavily on busing, and most school districts in our area basically determine their number of buses on their elementary needs. And when you look at a 50 to 70 seat elementary school bus, we always ramp up the factor because elementary kids can fit more to a bench than a middle school body or high school body. And so when you look at a bus loaded at 120%, 115%, and you're figuring out your entire bus load for the entire district based on your elementary morning run, and that you have extra buses during the day for secondary and for field trips, and that, trying to figure out how to get the kids to school and keep separation. We've done some test fits where you have a 72 seat bus that goes down to 18 to 24 kids if you were actually going to do 6 foot spacing. And so there's a lot of school districts in our state that are pushing to reduce the 6 foot separation and go with the guidance from the World Health Organization and the American Pediatric Association to go down to 3 feet, but everybody's going to wear masks. That politically, I don't think will hold, because the state governor has really aligned the directives for all of our phased reentry reopening around the CDC guidelines. And so how we're going to feed the kids, how we're going to transport the kids are 2 of the really key factors in trying to figure out how we're going to maintain our school day. The nutritional hour is an interesting one. We're looking at really thinning up all of our classrooms. And as I forget who mentioned, I don't know if it was Sean or John, but it was John. Elementary school teachers collect a lot of things, and there's a lot of fixtures, shelves, apertures, appliances, play sets, all kinds of different things, rocking chairs. And so we've gone through like Lake Washington School District and measured every single unit and figured out, how many chairs, how many kidney tables. We're trying to figure out where all of that's going to go. And the district hasn't made the decision yet as to whether or not any music or physical education programs are going to continue or be started, at least at the start of the new year. And so we're trying to figure out what assets and amenities we have at each school to temporarily store some of those things. I've seen some school districts in the area activating any certificated staff that can teach and redirecting them from being resource teachers or supplemental or substitute teachers to activating them to be full-time and looking to convert every possible space they can find into a classroom. And so you have a wide range of responses going on. One of the other health guidelines that we have to follow is a mandatory health check every morning. And so there's temperature screening, and we're trying to figure out, getting 600 or 700 elementary school kids into a school and ready for their school day is a challenge without COVID. But now if you start thinking about how are you going to do temperature checks? How are you going to get kids, if they're showing symptoms, where are you going to place them that's empathetic and with care? And so we're looking at stages and music rooms. If we're not going to be doing those activities, let's turn those into infirmaries, and we're going to triage, and we're going to set up a way that if a student does come to school with a fever, we're going to isolate them, but do it in a really caring way, put them in a place that they can hang out and get a second temperature check, and then either be picked up by their parents or released for the school day. But all those things are new space factors that we haven't, had to do in the past. The other aspect of nutrition is, I think we're going to move away from, a lot of school districts are going to move away from eating together in a commons and having some kind of more grab and go or lunch service to the classroom, which is really going to impact teacher planning time. It's going to impact the custodial operations, because now we're eating on carpet and we're eating in rooms that aren't designed for food. And so those are the real key things we're struggling to figure out, how to operationalize in a really efficient way here.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that was kind of one of my initial questions, was how if there was going to be self-screening at schools here in Hawaii, if that is like self-screening at home before they go to school, or if it's somehow being done on the spot, and how that's checked. I don't know if Sean or Randy, if you want to chime in on that. And if face masks are going to be required in classrooms, walking around campus, that sort of thing.
Well, on our side, what we've done is we have deployed reusable face masks, cloth face masks to all our employees as a first step. All our special ed needs, all our student health offices are all armed with PPEs. We have protocols for cleaning a room. We've created protocols for rapid response if we have a situation identified as a unfortunate person that has been tested positive for COVID, and the Department of Health implements its tracking system, its tracing system. So as best we can prepare, as best we have identified, we look at those options. Now, there are a couple gray areas. One is transportation. We fundamentally start the day with transporting students. We won't know for the first couple of weeks what that pickup is going to look like. Some parents may elect to bring their kids to school. Those that will use our transport, we are in the process of asking parents to make sure their kids have masks and hand sanitizers. And as we transport kids, windows will be open, and we start with 6 feet distancing. But we have made the commitment not to leave a child on the curb. And so we may have a full load, but we're not going to leave a kid on the curb, because that would seem more irresponsible. And we've created protocols for if a child maybe looks like he's just rolled out of bed and may look suspect in terms of his health, we seat him in the first seat, and we, prior to getting to school, we communicate with the school and ask that someone meet the vehicle and take that person to student health office. And the health professional makes that evaluation. We sanitize the bus after every use, going in after that trip, and then when we return, we clean it also, in and out. If we have a vehicle that has transported a child or a student that is suspected of a COVID situation, we have protocols to take that bus offline. Because what CDC tells us is that 7 days, that the virus fundamentally dies. But we also have protocols to fog that bus if necessary. So we've imagined almost every scenario and worked through it. Are we going to catch them all? No, but we're going to catch a high percentage of it. But we're going to see once we open those doors and we go, we have to be prepared. And like Sean said, I think our staff, our principals, our teachers, everyone involved is up to the challenge. And we just got to work together on this, and we'll succeed. We need to open the schools. We need to provide good, stable education, and we go from there.
Thanks, Randy. Kyla, to not leave you out of the conversation, what things have you seen, read about, or heard that, you know, can maybe offer some assurance to you that you feel safe going to school if you're part of that, what was that, 75% 1 to 2 day in class condition?
Yeah, so as I saw in Mr. Lee's slides and whatnot, I do feel very safe due to them reminding us about social distancing. And we not just have to social distance in school, but outside of school. So it shouldn't really be a problem there. But for other students, I know they may not understand why social distancing may be important, but social distancing should be important because we want to be safe for not just our family, but for our school, for admin, for the whole island. And them being able to even have a face-to-face is great. So if we do want to go back to this, what we call normal, I feel like we should put in the work now and earlier than later on where we still have to go through this. So it's just perspective wise that us students have to understand, and parents, and you know, admin and whatnot. So I think we're just all working together to try to make everyone happy. So
Thanks. So I imagine you've had some chance, Kyla, where you've been you're in some clubs, maybe, or maybe some other non-traditional classes. What do you think? You know, we talk about in class, but you know, if you're in the debate club or Glee or music for that matter, you know, what do you think about how those are going to be affected?
I am in robotics, and I know that robotics we were able to meet up, but we had to do the whole social distancing thing, and we were just grateful enough to even meet and be able to be face to face, but in our own safety. And we were able to do things that we couldn't do online, and you know, have that understanding of each other about robotics and whatnot. And I know maybe just for band it may be very difficult because of the whole risk of the instruments and whatnot. So finding solutions to that is going to be hard and difficult, but I think just if everyone works together, then we could get through it. So
I think, John, you can, since you're just opening up your new classroom, and I'm finishing up East Kapolei Middle School, now known as Honouliuli Middle, and we just spent months choosing furniture, which was completely based on trying to create, you know, group learning and you know, bringing kids together instead of separating them apart. And here we are with this situation. It's kind of ironic that that's taking place. We have a question on for panelists. It says, what are the Hawaii Department of Education protocols for when someone is tested positive or someone in that household tested positive? And is there something in place that will notify the school of that?
So I think we have two scenarios here, and we've gone through our summer school with three three examples of that. One is the person feels ill, reports it to the principal, and we have a chain of command system that works up to the deputy and the superintendent. That person self-isolates at home and determines to take a test. During that period, we shut down the room. We shut down as much as we can to trace where they have been on campus, and we lock it all down. We have a system which we call rapid response, where I can fog, or a company we contract, a professional cleaner goes in and fogs the room. And we establish that after 24 hours, that room is free and clear of the coronavirus, and we're back up in operation. From the school side, the Department of Health, if the person comes back positive, the Department of Health starts its tracing, because there's a person tracking that we have to do and a footprint tracking where they have been on our campus. And those two pathways are followed, and we go from there. And the principals actually have done the three exercises we went through. The principals have actually done an outstanding job. They hit all the buttons. We were pleasantly surprised that the protocol was being executed to its highest degree. So from where I stand, we're ready, and we will address it. And I think the complex area superintendents have communicated that extraordinarily well. So I'm confident that we're there, and we will respond quickly and effectively.
Thanks, Randy. So to the question of if someone in a student's household tests positive, I don't even know how that gets communicated to the school. I guess we have to depend on the family to be proactive and take into consideration everybody's health. Would a child in that household be allowed to come, or?
So in one of our experiences, in our culture, we're very social. That was reported, and we get reports from Department of Health, areas of incidence and concentrations. So we're pretty aware of where that's occurring. We do get some reports that, oh, somebody in my house was sick, and then our protocols kick in. You've got to remember that there are some, the HIPAA requirements, health information requirements, prohibit us from sharing that information. So we have some limitations, but that's to protect the rights of the individual. But I think the community is very involved. The awareness level is very high. Nobody wants the other guy to get sick, and nobody wants the other guy to pass it. So far we've had extraordinary cooperation. So once again, we've been practicing, lack of a better term. So I think we're in pretty good shape.
Well, and you brought up, that you've had some summer programs, and I'm pleased to report my children are just about finishing a 5-week summer school program. They did self-screening at home, and summer programs are usually fewer students, so they report like 12, 14 kids in the classroom that's probably designed for 24 or 28. They wear masks during that time, and then they wear masks to and from, and then just not at outdoor activities. But over the course of 5 weeks, there hasn't been any reports, over the course of, several hundred kids. So I'm hoping that sort of success can actually, say it is possible, right, with all these procedures in place.
Yeah, John and Sean have the two biggest areas. And so we've modeled Campbell High School, you know, it's got 3,100 students. Somebody's going to come to school looking a little under the weather or coughing or may have a fever. So now we're talking scale, right? So, I mean, and we know they're ready for the game. And we're gonna be pushed to the test on that one. Smaller schools are not so bad, but it's now all scale. But I think they understand the magnitude. They've lived their reality last year when school was in session. So they understand the magnitude, and we go from there.
So Randy, you were talking specifically about that tracing and where students or personnel have been. I've heard that some schools are, you know, whereas elementary level is typically more that the student stays in the classroom and gets taught all the classes, you know, in that classroom. Kyla, I'm sure, you know, you're going to many classes, right? Every other than a homeroom, you're going to different classes all the time. So question for Kyla and John Henry from management, has there been any discussion about moving teachers instead of moving kids? I don't even know if that's possible because you don't have all the kids in the same course. So maybe it's just those particular courses that are universal that's possible. I don't know.
And first, a very few of our programs that are self-contained the entire day. Like we have our International Baccalaureate program where the courses are pretty much selected already for the students. You know, they're a self-contained cohort of students. So, you know, that is possible where they can stay in one room. But for the vast majority of our other classes, you know, where we gave, you know, student voice and choice, meant they got to kind of pick their schedule for the most part. So while some of their core classes might be cohorted, you know, their passion type classes, their electives, you know, those they're all going to be going in different directions. So it would be hard for, you know, a teacher to move around just because, you know, the students, and that's one of the benefits. You know, you often talk about the drawbacks of being a big school, but we also are able to provide almost everything under the sun in terms of course selections and programs. But that does make it harder, you know, if we had to do some type of contact, you know, tracing and things like that. We do, you know, we are in a 4x4 block schedule though. So we're not one of those where you have 7 periods or 8 periods. We go to 4 periods. So, you know, that, you know, hopefully would minimize the number of people that would be coming into contact with. So we're not a school that has 6 or 7 periods where you'd be, even if you're rotating into on a several day period, you know, what we know about, you know, the virus in terms of, you know, it takes a couple of days to show symptoms, but contagious, you know, well before that.
Okay. Waiting for a few more questions to come in, but you know, we have been talking so much kind of negativity and challenges. I'm wondering if I can start with Sean to give us some thoughts of what do you think the positives could be come out of this? What do you think we either learn for the good or just how things operate for the good?
Yeah, there's absolutely positives in this. And I think the biggest one is it forces creativity and innovation, and it forces us to try different forms of delivering education. Nothing positive of what prompts that. I mean, by all means, a disease prompting this is not a positive thing, but being that it's forcing us to look at how we're delivering education and to pilot and roll out, you know, distance learning and even a blended form of education. And that's something that's not totally new to education. There are things called the flipped classroom where you have that online component where students, when they get a lesson on their own and come to the face-to-face instruction to elaborate on that. So those things have been in place for some time, but to scale it to as large a scale as we're doing now is really putting us to the test. So I think the biggest positive is pushing us to, I guess, explore other ways of delivering education. Right now, the only big introduction is distance learning, we may come up with something else also. So it's a big step out of the box for everybody, but I think without this, it would have been really difficult to launch something like this on a big scale that we are now. So in that sense, it's exciting to see what we can innovate from this situation right now.
Thanks. And I think, we can thank our lucky stars of how much technology we have available to us. Just 10, 15 years ago, this would not have, this would have been far more challenging and if not almost impossible. Steve, do you have any thoughts on the positives? Lift us out of the, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Yeah. So for context, my former job when I was chief operations officer in Tacoma, we had 21,000 kids out of 30 living below the poverty line. And so we had 21 elementary schools that were 100% free and reduced. So we didn't even have to have a point of sale system. The kids had backpacks that we filled for the weekend. They came back with it. Equity is such a massive issue in all of this. And I think this really catalyzed districts thinking about what the home life of a student is, because, you get the kids to school and you have to work around the parameters and all the different attributes of what they bring to school. But when you have kids at home, I saw school districts going leaps and bounds above to provide Wi-Fi hotspots, extra computers, and other things to reach those kids. And so I think, just in light of what we're going through nationally about equity and access, this really catalyzed it for the districts I've seen around about how do you make sure that every kid has the same level of access. I totally agree with Sean in what he was talking about. I love the flipped classroom. And, you see kids go home and have to struggle with trying to figure out what the lecture was all about. Whereas if they could, go home, do the lecture on video, on YouTube, on Khan Academy, whatever it was, and then come to an environment where they get to be hands-on, proactive, and solve problems. I saw it firsthand. I felt like before this, like I was an active parent. I had a fifth grader and a ninth grader that just finished this year. And I thought I was involved before that, but no, being a COVID home parent teacher was eye-opening. And I've never been more connected to my teachers, my students' teachers, and I've never been more connected to their lesson plan and all the things that they're doing. And so I love that. I love that we came out of that in that kind of environment where, we were doing art projects. We were in the wood shop. We were practicing how math is applied in the real world. We were doing Chihuly plastic bottle recycling glass art projects, all these kind of things that I was missing the opportunity on. And I know a lot of my friends and colleagues that I talk to have felt that same way, that this pandemic has brought families closer together. That's from my context. And we're a two-parent with my wife is able to stay at home. And not all the families have that. And so I have to keep reminding myself that my experience wasn't what everybody else experienced. And so, I would say my struggle was fighting over limited bandwidth as every single person in the house was streaming something. And I was getting Zoom meetings bumped. That's kind of a first world problem when you think about all the issues in equity access that we have to deal with. From a professional working environment, I'm managing nearly $1 billion in construction right now. And I spent so much time in the car driving from meeting to meeting, client to client, site to site. And we've completely pivoted to a virtual world that is going to be the new normal. And, I have my company I work for is 150 people. We're completely rethinking about how much real estate we actually need to have, because our efficiency actually went up during COVID. Our utilization rates, our hours billable, all of that actually went through the roof because we weren't traveling. There wasn't sick leave, there wasn't vacation, but a lot of it was just there's no travel. There was instant access. And with that also came some negative side effects about people being logged in and connected too much. And so there's all these balances that we have to strike. But I think the positives are connecting to people in new ways, more efficiently, and thinking about what kind of access folks have, because this all affected us differently.
Yeah, that's great perspective, Steve. My kids are 6 and 10, and the 4 years separation. I mean, how they were doing their at-home instruction was very different. My 10-year-old was able to do it much more independently than my 6-year-old, and then each of their teachers were doing a different platform, and that was really challenging for us, my wife and I, to kind of grapple with who needed what how. But on the upside, exactly as you said, I never had a chance to see what it was that they were, how it was that they were learning, how they were, what it was they were struggling with, what they were doing really well with, and kind of seeing those like hands-on, especially when I got to kind of overhear a daily or check-in with a teacher, and you kind of hear that whole camaraderie of the class that, sitting at home or at my job, I don't get to participate in. So that was kind of enlightening.
Yeah, and I'm not sure.
Kyla, did you have any?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say real quick.
I was just getting Steve.
Another benefit that I saw just real quick was, at least in the mainland, I see districts being incredibly savvy with data and metrics around learning through standardized testing and all the metrics that they have access to that they can watch and scaffold around students based on periodic tests and check-ins. And one of the things that I'm seeing now is, the facilities side and the operational side of school districts, I think, has been lacking behind that curve of having really good data about how they operate. And through this process, I've seen a lot of school districts really do deep dives into how they operate, and they're actually looking at metrics. There was a study that we were just looking at in trying to figure out teachers at risk versus younger teachers that can be in person, face to face, and trying to map that across a 30,000 student school district to figure out how can you pivot and have a older teacher that could be at risk be doing the virtual learning, and having the younger teacher be the person in face to face, and trying to figure out how that's all going to work, because a lot of the schools around here have older teachers. So trying to figure out, we're dealing with it at a different scale. I think our death rate is higher than your total case rate. So we're around 1,400 deaths. I think you guys, if my data was right, I Googled, you guys had maybe 1,200 cases. We're up to 42 or 43,000 cases in Washington. And so really trying to figure out, and there was a question in the chat about what are we doing to protect our employees. It's really mapping and understanding and using data to try and figure out how best to support them as they're transitioning into this virtual world, because we have teachers that are able to do it more easily than others. So that's been an interesting challenge. When I was in Tacoma, something like 60% of our teachers were within 5 years of retirement. And so that paints a totally different picture on how we're going to do this in person now.
Yeah, Randy, how do you see our school district comparing to that?
Well, we're fortunate. We're fortunate that we're on an island. We're fortunate that we're a small community. And I think the upside is we've been able to rally as a community. There is always going to be one or two knuckleheads out there that just won't listen to what the recommendations are, but we'll work through that. I think it clearly has brought the community together. What Steve said kind of interests me. That concern is this going to motivate earlier retirement of our teachers? Right. We have a lot of senior teachers, older teachers. So that's a bit of a concern when you lose that kind of institutional knowledge. It's just not that easy to replace. I think it's helped us appreciate or use technology to a higher degree, which is a positive. So in some ways it's hyperdrived some things. Frankly speaking, I like that there's not as much traffic on the road because everybody's staying home. And I think it's helped our families kind of unite differently because now you spend more time, you're all together at home. So that's an upside. But clearly education and the delivery of education is going to change. But I think that's been happening for the last 10 years. You know, now in high school, you can get a 2-year associate's degree in college, right? Which is a positive. Sean, as a parent, now you don't have to pay for the 2 years of undergraduate work. You need to pay only for the 2 that you got to finish up. But the high school and the school experience is where some of your best friends were made. How is that going to change? Yeah. And what are you going to remember from that experience? We see it, you know, the older guys see it from one perspective, but I think the younger guys see it very differently. You know, they're the generation that's going to embrace distance learning. So it's just part of the genesis of all that we're doing. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Kyla, do you have any positives you want to share from either what you did experience already at the end of your year, or what you see ahead?
Yeah, so I've noticed that since we've been at home, staying at home, we have to find a way to be comfortable. And I know a lot of kids at school are just like, I want to go home already. It's too hot for this, I just want to lay in my bed. And now at this time, they get to be comfortable in what they wanted to do, So they can stay in their pajamas. They can learn through the technology that we have now. And I know a lot of us, we have computers, we have phones, and technology is like our new thing. That's like our thing that we know all about. So we're positive because we get to stay home, eat snacks and whatnot, but we still get to have that education and to communicate with each other through our technology. And what's very positive is that our schools and everyone were very understanding of each other, and we know how to spread aloha and be very thoughtful. So that's what's very positive from this pandemic.
Great. And thank goodness for Snapchat or whatever. Yes, right. Yeah. So we have another question about if portable hand washing stations or dispensers are going to be placed around the school, and also if there's any needs to augment wireless systems in the schools, or has that kind of work already been done for the most part? Maybe John, you can answer that as a principal.
Yes, so most of our classrooms do have the hand sanitizing stations. They're wall mounted. So our students and our staff do have access to that. We also bought quite a few of those additional gallon ones that we're replacing strategically across the campus. Also, we are looking at how to augment, if they're talking about like a auditory system, because we know it will be more challenging, with our staff, our teachers wearing masks. It is hard to project. So we're looking at, if that's a possibility to somehow have a clip-on microphone, especially if they're carrying a mask with a face shield, it's even harder to project. So we're looking for options on that, especially on a wireless, kind of option. So, we don't have someone who feels like they have to shout or, talk in a loud voice. Not everybody has that really loud teacher voice. So that would be challenging. Also, if we're looking at, trying to do any kind of synchronous learning, whether we're trying to, add in the distance learning students at home paired with, the students that are in front of us in the classroom. We know that, a regular computer system, the laptops or the Chromebooks are not going to be sufficient for that. So if we could, start to expand, and of course that would be a cost item, but, how do we start to retrofit some of our rooms so they do have that capability to, make it, easier for a student at home to hear, if we were trying to, incorporate them, in the face-to-face lesson, especially if they chose to be completely online and are never coming on campus.
How about your campus overall? Do you have pretty good Wi-Fi in the outdoor spaces? So if there was more outdoor learning, that they'd have connectivity?
It does reach outside, outside of the buildings. You can't go too far in some places of the campus, but our Wi-Fi, is pretty sufficient, I would say, at this point.
Yeah, and those, I haven't been on your campus, but that picture you showed of the building with the shade structure over the courtyard, I mean, that looked like a terrific space to be able to hang out in or do any number of alternative learning environment there.
It is, and as we look at, the different types of project-based learning, we do have to look at, a different way to engage the students. And as what you mentioned, in terms of, the furniture that we were purchasing and those, the collaborative type furniture, the innovative furniture, terrific and very expensive, but of course, dependent on, students being in closer in proximity, but getting them outside of the classroom. What you saw there in Old Building was a great example of, what you could do in terms of incorporating, HA and, things like that into a, making sure that if you look at that building, it's in Hawaii basically, and making sure that that's incorporated into the learning and you're getting out there, you can distance yourselves and things like that. So definitely what we hope more of our teachers incorporate in their lessons.
Thanks. So I know in the news there's been a lot of various reports about kind of agreements and whatnot between the teachers union and the state, and I don't want to delve too deep into that, but I think we've had the benefit here of Kyla as a student, and I'm just wondering what is being heard from your teachers or other staff as to what their biggest concerns are starting the school year. And maybe Sean, you can start on that, and maybe John, if you have direct knowledge of teachers.
I think everybody wants safety first, and yet all the teachers are eager to get back to see their students, especially face to face. So I think just like the public, how there's a split between those who are not going to send their kids to school no matter what, just because of safety reasons. There are also those who want to send their kids back to school no matter what, so they can go back to work. I think the same is for the teachers. There's a big majority of teachers that really want to get back to school. They want to fit as many kids as they can in their classrooms within social distance guidelines to provide as much face-to-face as they can. And yet there are understandably some teachers who are apprehensive of being back in school and just want to be assured that social distancing is in place so that everybody's safe, so that kids are safe and that they're safe as well. So I think everybody's trying to find that balance of everybody's eager to get back to school. We all want as much face-to-face as we can with the students, and yet make sure everybody is safe at school.
Thanks. And John, I don't know how often you've been in touch with your staff and faculty over these past summer months. What are you hearing from them?
We did have a couple of faculty meetings, which is unusual, during the summertime to have a meeting and at the end of June, and it was to give them an opportunity to, talk about the different models, the different options for delivery of instruction. And they have got great ideas. As most of you know, at a secondary school, our teachers aren't shy and they'll express their questions and concerns, and they're absolutely valid. Health and safety is important, and it's not only about them as individuals, they always have in the back of the mind the people that, they live with at home and they take care of, they're important. And we always have to be careful of that. So, addressing anything from, what is our mask policy going to be, the spacing within the classroom, how many students are, I'm going to have in my classroom at a time, and things like that. So, and worried about the students' well-being also, because oftentimes at secondary school, the unstructured time is, challenging for us to make sure that, the students are making the right decisions. And, while we might have been, on the patrol for things like vaping in before, now we have to be even more cognizant of crowds, and the students are just going to be happy to see each other again. And not that they don't care or they don't know about the pandemic, they're just going to be, happy to see each other again. And that's going to be nice to see at the same time, but reminding them, that we're not hugging, at this time, and we need to keep our distance. So just, how do we, kind of constantly put that out there, and then being in a positive manner. We don't want to be punitive and looking at, how do we, give consequences for people not following the rules. It's about, reinforcing that it's a responsibility. It's how we take care of each other, that we're part of a community. And the way that this is going to get better is us understanding that, and being mindful of the way we interact with other people, because we care about each other, and that's important. And that's the approach we should take, instead of giving consequences and things like that. And it's about educating and making sure people come with the right mindset when we come back in.
Thanks. So I missed a few questions under this Q&A portion of, so maybe we'll just try to hit on it real quick and close. So real quick, Sean, are middle and elementary schools doing anything differently in terms of on campus, off campus?
I'm sorry, on campus versus off campus?
Yeah, John mentioned his setup for the high school level. I'm wondering, someone's asking if middle and elementary are going to start with a different percentage. Is elementary going to try to be 100% on, or also hybrid?
Yeah, our the push was to bring back our vulnerable learners face to face as much as possible, which is our special needs population, our English language learner population, and our lower elementary students. A lot of it just depended on just a straight math formula of the physical capacity of the campus tied in with the student enrollment. So if you had campuses that had a lot of physical capacity with low enrollment, they had the ability to spread out a lot more. Basically, social distancing cuts classes in half or in 2/3. So schools that are like our schools in Campbell and Kapolei complex, all of our schools are bursting at the seams. That's why we're building new schools like every 2 years. So we just don't have the capacity to split up very much. Most of our schools hardly take any geographic exceptions because we're already full. So it was really difficult for us to fit as many kids as possible. So there was a push to bring in as many lower L kids as we could. However, for our schools, some were able to accommodate that, many were not. And if they did, it would have meant all of grades 3, 4, 5, and some of our elementaries have 6, would have been distance learning the whole time. Because basically you take half that school, you cover the whole campus. So it was a school by school decision depending on their context and their capacity at their school. So schools that could accommodate all of K1, 2 every day with some rotation for the upper grades did so. And those that couldn't because they wanted to have grades 3, 4, 5 have some in-person face-to-face, chose to do more of an alternating schedule for the whole school. So every school is different in that way. But the push was to bring back as many of the lower L kids as we could, just because they have a harder time with distance learning in comparison to the older kids. For our middle schools, most of them are doing a blended version of rotating through school. We do have a brand new school, A4LE Middle School, who's opening 6th grade this year. Because they have a brand new facility, kids are still trickling in. They have a big facility with low enrollment for this year only. So they're able to bring back all of their kids to school and maintain a 6-foot social distancing. So it was just a school by school thing. I think a lot of our schools will pilot something in the beginning, and as they get a hang of it and adjust to the situation, hopefully we can figure out ways to bring back more students face to face.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That just about wraps it up. I want to thank all of you very much for your time. John Henry, Steve, Randy, Sean, Kyla. I think everyone, I mean, it looks like we had 55 to 60 participants, so that's really great, and probably many more than we could have otherwise fit in some other venue other than like a school gymnasium. So I thank you very much for your time. Donna, I think, is going to throw up a page about continuing education units being applied for on attendees' behalf. Donna, do you want to say anything about that, how that's being done?
Certainly. So if you need a certificate of attendance for this, we have been approved for AIA 1.5 hours of learning units. And if you have an AIA number, please email it directly to me and we'll make sure that we get that reported for you or send a certificate to you.
Great. All right. Thanks again for everyone who attended. Thanks to my the A4LE Hawaii Chapter for putting this all together, and thanks again to our attendees, especially Steve. You're now at 6:30, so it's time for dinner at least. So appreciate you hanging out late for us.
Yep. No, this was great. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. All right. Aloha, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.